Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, I wanted to take another solo episode time and chat with everybody because I think something that keeps coming up over and over, and when this happens, be it in sessions or in my work with my life coaching clients, it usually is a ping to me to kind of bring this out in a bigger way and just really communicate it to more people because I think we're probably all experiencing it. So part of my work, and I was having a conversation with somebody not that long ago, and she was saying, like, what exactly do you do? And I said, well, I primarily work with parents. I also do life coaching. But I said, I really try to help parents reframe the daily challenges that they're running into. And I have a big focus on emotion regulation and how to establish that, and also how to connect and work with strong-willed kids. You guys know, if you've been listening to me, they are my faves. So it's really about putting some pieces together and really better understanding the parenting journey that we're on and being able to connect the dots. And so she said to me, oh, that's really interesting because I've been thinking a lot about, her kids are older. And she said, I've been thinking a lot about that same idea of like looking at my kids and really thinking to myself, how do I regulate myself before sort of addressing whatever the issue might be or the challenging conversation. And so I said to her, oh my gosh, it's so funny that you're saying that. I have this 4-step process called PAR. It stands for pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. And I sat with, sort of why it hit me when she was describing like part of her journey. And she's also been following me for a long time and listening to my stuff. And her and I have communicated throughout the years. And she later kind of shot me a text and she goes, I think you're saying the wrong thing. I think you need to tell people what you really do is you help parents regulate themselves first before their child, because until you do, nothing else really works or matters. And it really hit me. I think that's part of why PAR is effective. Pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect, shifting you out of reactive to more thoughtfully responsive. So with that, and kind of as that conversation continued to evolve and it started to show up in coaching sessions and things like that, I started to think about this idea of really putting the spotlight or the emphasis on a regulated parent. Like, we're always talking about regulating a kid and how to help a kid regulate their emotions and how do we teach them how and all these things. And you guys know this because I've said this before, but the number one question I get is like, how do I regulate my own emotions? How am I even supposed to help my child if I don't even know how to do it? And I think the sort of the answer is in the question, right? Like, if we don't know how to regulate ourselves, how in the world are we going to help our kids? And are we going to just follow a script but bypass our own emotions the whole time? So in this episode, I just want to break down a little bit about what I mean when I talk about this idea of being a regulated parent, because you're going to hear me sort of talking about it more. And really, for me, the hope is like, how do you become a regulated person? And by regulated, I don't mean a robot. I don't mean perfectly like unable to ever have excited responses to things, or you're not going to have moments where you get terribly angry or frustrated or lose it. I mean, that's just part of it. But when we can really build this into a practice, again, that's an important word, a practice, we start to get better and better at implementing it in the moments that feel challenging. It's not one of those things that we learn overnight, but I'm going to explain a little bit about my journey and how I learned to really, truly understand the benefits of regulation. And then I'm going to tie it back to where and how I think it's useful for you, depending on the challenge that you might be in. So I always kind of break it down to two very specific reasons why most people struggle to stay calm or to be regulated. Because sometimes I think we say we're calm, but that doesn't mean we're regulated, because underneath the surface, we might be really anxious. We might be really panicked. We might feel afraid. We might be completely bothered and unable to stay sort of steady, which is different. So really, with regulation, there's two reasons why it's hard. And I'm going to talk about it through the lens of parenting, but I'll apply it back to sort of real life scenarios as well, because again, this is one of those skills that just translates across our entire lives and really the benefits are endless. But number one is we usually don't know how to access the tools in the moment. That's a very different process than being calm when nothing hard around us is happening, right? Like, it's easy for me to meditate in the morning because the mornings are pretty calm for me. So it's much harder for me to find that same sense of grounded calm if, something happens that completely throws me off, or an emergency or a phone call that changes everything, right? Those are different moments. So one is learning how to access tools when you're in the hard moment. So being able to do that, most of us don't know how, or in part it's because we weren't given permission to do so, right? Most of us grew up either bypassing our emotions, suppressing our emotions, avoiding them altogether, or just, not naming them. That's for sure. We just didn't, there was resistance because we were probably punished or we felt afraid. So there's that piece of it, right? Our tendencies either to avoid discomfort, to shut it down, to control, right? Those are all sort of the things that emerge from that place when we don't like the way we're feeling. Those are the places where we go to. And then the second reason why we struggle to stay regulated is we truly don't know what to do. And I think this is really fair. I think we underestimate how helpful a plan is. And that's part of why I love coaching so much too. And that's why I do it for 12 weeks, because it's a practice and it takes time. So I do two things. I help you figure out the tools that you need, because it's specific to each person. Not everyone benefits from the same tools, and help you anchor in that moment so you can regulate. But I also make sure you have a really clear plan, because if you know what to do, you will stay 10 times steadier. So one of the analogies I use in terms of a life analogy, I just wrote about this in Substack, but let's say you are somebody who's experiencing symptoms, and you're going to the doctor and you're asking the doctor, like, what do you think it could be? And I just don't feel like myself, and I have this and I have that. And you keep coming out of those doctor's appointments and everyone's kind of like, I don't know, nothing, everything's coming up negative, or your blood work looks great, or this seems fine. And while you could feel some relief in knowing that some of these maybe scarier diagnoses are getting ruled out, there's still that nagging thought in your mind that says, I just want them to tell me what it is so I know what to do. There is something anchoring when we have a plan, when we know what to do, how to respond, what to say, what not to say. But it's the combination of not being able to access tools coupled with not knowing exactly what to do that leaves us in such a state of dysregulation. And so now when we tie that back to parenting, when you're dysregulated, I've said this before, a dysregulated adult can't really help a dysregulated child. You're going to grab for solutions that are either going to aim at controlling the situation. You're going to try to get out of the discomfort. You're going to offer an adjustment to the boundary because you want to get out of that space. You might double down and try to reach for tactics that might have been used on you. So we make threats. We leverage shame or fear just to get it to stop. We feel somewhat out of control, and the aim is just get it to stop, right? And so your child sees this, feels this, senses this, and they don't really have anywhere to anchor or to de-escalate, because it feels like, man, when I really have a hard time, everyone around me really has a hard time. And that's sort of the best way that they could name it. So knowing that, let's look at the first one, right? Which is like our inability to access tools in the moment. So this would be a really good one too. Like I was even working on this with a life coaching client, to really think about like just noticing in your day-to-day, how does that show up for you? What other moments beyond parenting cause dysregulation for you? And you might be like, no, nothing. And I don't know, that might be true, which is awesome. But my guess is there are other things. Talking to a parent might trigger you. Certain pet peeves that you might have. We kind of call these things pet peeves, but they're the things that really cause us to get triggered, to get activated, to yell, to swear, to maybe underreact, right? That's a whole other area that we could tackle, and how problematic it can be if we're just avoidant. So you want to think about what are the things that kind of get you, right? That get you to react in a way where afterwards you're going, shoot, like I just hate that I do that. I hate that I lose my cool. So now we want to look at, once we have established sort of a sense of what those things are, what you want to think about is, can I just build in a pause? Right? This is where PAR is so helpful and where the coaching on PAR can be really useful. But can I just build in a pause? Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that's easier said than done, I agree with you. And again, go back to that idea that let's give ourselves grace and let's treat it as a practice, right? So pausing for me, and I've said some of these before, but there are a lot of different ways we could integrate this. Breathwork is one of my favorite things. I'm in the process of getting a breathwork training right now because I really want to start using it in the context of coaching and being able to send clients audio files of just a couple minute breathwork exercises just to get you back in your body. I've been using breathwork for years and it is really transformative. I can't say enough good things about it. I could go into all the science and all that, but that's going to take us completely off track. But if you want me to, I can make another podcast episode all about breathwork. But back to that pause, right? One mindful breath is really all it takes. So what a mindful breath is like we just really inhale through the nose and you just feel the air coming in. We're thinking about that breath. And we exhale through the mouth, and you can even do it in a more exaggerated way. but you're going to exhale longer. So the idea is, like, when I first started doing this, is like you really want to empty. It isn't that you're just like, it's not a shallow breath. It's like you're taking a real steady breath, right? So a big inhale through the nose, and then as you exhale, you almost want to feel yourself empty. And what you want to just bring attention to is, like, as you empty, can you relax those shoulders? Because that's where we carry a lot of that tightness and a lot of that reactivity. So even that will change the trajectory of what happens in terms of the tantrum, the argument, the meltdown, whatever it might be. One breath. 9 out of 10 times, situations in parenting are not as urgent as we feel they are. Like, unless it's a safety concern, you can give yourself that 5-second breath, right? So now we take that deep breath and we just acknowledge, right? Oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated when they speak to me this way. Why do they say no every time I ask them to do something? Look at them completely ignoring me. They never listen. Whatever it is, just acknowledge, right? Don't fix it. Don't change it. We're just acknowledging the state that we're in. And then we shift into that response of, like, what does my child need? And these are some of the things you want to think about, because we ask that question because we want distance from what we're feeling to the actual solution to the problem. Because if we're too entangled in it, we're naturally going to become reactive. Every time you do this, you make me so upset when you don't listen. Look at your brother. He's always listening. You're never listening. How come you're always doing this, right? We get so personal and we get really reactive, and we start to say things that almost like don't make sense. Like, sometimes I used to say this to myself when my kids were younger. And if I like went on one of those rants, I'd be like, I sound ridiculous. Like, if you kind of like are outside of your body listening to yourself, it's like, what am I even saying to them? So in a nutshell, if you can separate your state, right? Because it's okay, that triggered feeling is going to go away. But if you can separate your state from the actual need in the moment, which is like, what does my child really need in this moment? You can get a little more grounded and centered. And now that solution starts to become more clear. The doing becomes more available. So these are examples, but I'm just going to throw out a bunch and you can think about what applies in your situation, because this is applicable to from a 2-year-old who's throwing a tantrum to a 15-year-old who's refusing to listen to you. So number one is, do they need that boundary just held? And do we need to look at, I am safe and so are they, and it's okay that I'm uncomfortable. It's okay that they're struggling. This is a lesson they need to learn. This is important that they understand that this is a boundary they can't cross. Sometimes that's the answer, right? Sometimes you might, for a younger child, think to yourself, okay, they've been crying for a little bit. Is it time to co-regulate? Should I go in there and redirect? Sometimes that is the appropriate answer. You know what kind of day everyone's had. Is it been a long day, or are schedules compromised? Are we eating on time? Are they hangry at that point? What's the thing that they need, right? So those are the things you want to be asking yourself. If it does turn physical, let's say it's a child who's throwing or kicking or whatever, then we do have to go into physical management. And you want to stay regulated more so than ever when your child requires physical management. Otherwise, it's going to feel so aggressive. So you want to be able to say to yourself, like, I'm safe and so are they, but it is my job to keep them safe. So I have to go hold their arms so that they don't swing and punch and do whatever. Or I have to go hold their body right now so that they don't throw something out the window, or that they don't pummel their sibling, or they don't jump off the couch and hurt themselves. Like, we have to be able to do that. But again, when you're in that regulated state and you're telling yourself, my job is to keep you safe, and the only words you should think about using in that moment is, I will not let you hurt yourself. I will not let you hurt another. My job is to hold you and keep you safe. And just say that. And don't worry about how upset they're getting. You're just safety, safety, safety. That's all you're thinking at that point. So again, you're asking yourself, what do they need? Sometimes, and this is very often with preteens and teens, even school-aged kids, when arguing becomes the challenge and they're arguing against something that you're saying, you want to ask yourself, what do they need? And maybe they need to know your boundary. So that might sound like, I can tell by the way you're talking to me that you're super upset. I will not talk to you until you're calm. And then they might say, oh, you're ignoring me. And then you can just say, no, it's up to you. Do you want to talk to me about this? And if they say yes, great, then you need to calm down. Take a full minute and go calm down. I'm here. I'm ready when you are. That boundary exists for everybody. Just I don't let people talk to me that way. It's okay to be upset. Give yourself time to calm down. So do you see how my response changes now, and I am just in charge of me. I can't control you, right? We tell ourselves we can control our kids, but you really can't. So now for an older child, again, I wouldn't necessarily do that for a younger one, but maybe in some instances it would just depend. But that's what you really want to think about. So those are the things, and those are just, again, some quick examples. But when you're thinking of what does my child need, right? That's one where that comes to mind, where it's like, is it just that they're so uncomfortable and struggling? And when they're expressing their emotions this way, it activates something in me. And then as a result, that discomfort is so hard to manage. I just want it to stop. So I'm going to shift into control, right? A lot of times control is our default mode, especially a lot of mothers in particular. I think we go to this. And so we adjust and we give, okay, fine, you can do it just as 2 more minutes, but don't ask me again. And And like, we just try to control the outcome so that they don't get that upset. Whatever it is, you really want to be able to tap in. Now, the second part of what I was talking about was like having a plan, right? Knowing what to do. So a lot of times, and again, I know not everybody can do coaching, but if I were coaching you and we were on a call, the first thing I would say to you is like, what are the predictable behaviors? What are the predictable patterns, right? And usually a parent knows, like, oh man, transitions. The minute I have to tell them they have to stop playing and then we have to move over and do homework, or it's time to come inside, or it's time to get ready for bed, it's time to go to school, whatever that might be. When we know that, when you know something pretty predictably, I would front load a plan, meaning I would say to my child, hey, I notice that every time you have to stop doing your favorite thing and then we have to kind of jump over and do something else, you have a really hard time, and I get that. But here's what's going to happen. You get to play with your toys. And then at 5 o'clock, I'm going to tell you it's time to put the toys away and to come over and do our reading, whatever. You're not going to be happy. I always say, name the feeling they're likely going to have. You're probably not going to be happy, and I get it. But if you don't, I will just come and take the toys and put them away, and I'll pick you up and I'll bring you over to the table. And if you don't stay, I can't make you, but we won't do anything fun until we finish our schoolwork or our homework or whatever the thing is, right? So now we're setting ourselves up with some kind of a plan to follow through on. And in the beginning, is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Because I talked about this on another podcast episode, but you're changing a pattern. Kids love patterns. They learn through patterns. They learn through predictability. So when you're changing what you normally do and you're responding differently, a lot of times it gets worse before it gets better. But it has to go that way, especially if your aim is to be able to say, hey, put the toys away, you got your homework. And then they go, okay, that's great, right? That's the aim. But you're far away from there if every time you say, hey, clean up your toys, it's time for your homework, and they ignore you, and then they throw the toy, and then they scream and they cry, and then all other things that happen, right? Same thing with older kids, like even a teen, if you're trying to set a boundary and every time they do, they argue with you, and then you argue back, and then eventually you just kind of say, fine, whatever, do whatever you want. I don't care anymore. Like that's usually we just get so, like we just resign almost. Well, when that happens, your teen knows that's the pattern. So I just keep fighting. I'll keep arguing. We'll go back and forth. And then usually I get either an adjustment or a fine. Sometimes they get really mad, but usually it works in my favor. So again, you just want to think about like, where is it going? Where is the pattern now? Where is it taking them and you? And we have to change that, right? So that we can get a different outcome and also keep you regulated in the process. So that's, in a nutshell, what you want to think about is like, what are those predictable things? That's the best place to start. And can you build out a plan for those things? How would you address it ahead of time? And a really good thing to ask yourself is, what am I going to do if they don't listen? Because you have to assume they're going to do what they've always been doing, right? And so you need something. So again, it's not always a consequence. Sometimes I'll work with clients and I'll just tell them, let's completely shift the schedule. You have all your highly preferred things happening first, and then their non-preferred things come after. You're already setting yourself up to fail in that instance. Let's get them to do the thing they don't want to do first, and let's give them the thing they really want to do at the end, right? And all you're doing there is just resequencing. And they're going to be like, I don't want to and whatever, but that's okay. Right? When we know that that's the plan, you will stay so much more steady. So having a plan, I can tell you even with my clients, we work together for 12 weeks. I would say probably good 2-3 weeks in, they start to say, I can't believe how calm I'm being. I can't believe, like they were losing it. They were upset. They were so mad at the boundary, but because I knew what to expect and because I knew what to do, I just felt confident and clear and I wasn't rattled and I could stay regulated. And then they start to regulate much faster, your kids. So it's all connected, but it really boils down to those two things. Accessing tools in the moment. So again, going into PAR, using some tangibles. I talked about a mindful breath, but there's a ton you could do. You can rock, you can sway, you can pace. You can go up on your toes and back down on your feet. I call it a roll, but you're just going to do it a couple of times. You're just doing something quick to interrupt your natural reactivity, that habitual reactivity that you're looping in, right? We're stopping that. We're interrupting that. So build in that small pause the best you can. Anchor and go into that acknowledgement. I'm so frustrated, right? Just name it. Don't change it. We're just naming it. Pausing and naming alone is already going to start to regulate your nervous system. And then we go into, okay, I'm going to take care of myself later in that reflection, but what does my child need in this moment? And now we got a little room to work here. We've studied ourselves just a bit. We're a little more anchored. And then it depends on what your child's needs are, right? And then in that moment, but again, clarity comes when you can study yourself first. And I do have parents that I work with who are like, okay, I did the pausing, I did the acknowledging, but I'm still like, okay, but now what? And those are fair questions. But the more you practice this, you'll try something, right? And you'll go, oh my gosh, they calmed down really quickly that time. Or you know what? I just sat and held the boundary and I didn't budge. And I was totally forecasting that it was going to be a 25-minute tantrum. And then after 3 minutes, they were like, okay, and they moved on. And then you all of a sudden are like, I'm going to do that again. And so do you see what I mean? This is a stacking thing, right? The more you do, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you take that feedback and go, okay, I'll make this adjustment. So again, this is all available to us. It just starts with how much we can regulate ourselves first. And then how can we shift that into then a plan? Because when we know what to do, it's naturally then that loop comes right back and that regulation piece becomes much easier to access. So I hope that makes sense. I know I kind of went in a few different areas, but let me know. You guys can email me at albiona@theparentingreframe.com or message me on Instagram and just shoot me a DM if you have questions. But all of this just takes time. So give yourself grace and compassion. And really, for me, learning to regulate ourselves is one of the most critical skills you can learn. And it's not just going to help your relationship with your child. Every relationship changes. Everything improves because we're no longer contingent. Our peace, our inner joy, our inner sense of knowing, our confidence is no longer constantly at the mercy of outside experiences. So I'll leave it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this one and message me any questions. Until next time.